Hello and welcome to my podcast, Used to Be's Do Count, with me, Dean James. You're listening to Season 2, Episode 9, I Used to Be a Cop. In this episode, I speak with David Booth about his long career in the US police force based in Atlanta, Georgia. David transitioned to be a road traffic cop, which is always where he saw his career. David's career unfortunately came to a sudden end when he himself experienced a devastating road traffic accident.
And that same woman who was still texting and driving straight rear-ended me while she was still texting and driving, and at impact speed, she hit me doing 75 miles an hour on the motorcycle. I was thrown back onto the hood of her car, and she proceeded to carry me on the hood of her car for another 500 feet before she hit another vehicle, which catapulted me into the air. And then I landed in the concrete, was hospitalized with a severe shattered pelvis, multiple fractured vertebrae, and a torn bladder. I was put into a medically induced coma on that Monday, and that's where I went downhill, and they did not expect me to live through that.
But even though the risk is there, did you ever foresee anything like this happening in your career?
I'll tell you this, police officers are just like everybody else. They believe it's never going to happen to them until it does.
Are you ready to hear David's story? Well, without further ado, let's dive right in. Okay, so David Booth, hello, how are you today?
Doing good. How about you?
Yeah, I'm doing very well, thank you. I'm doing very well. It's towards the end of my day. This is my early evening, and I'm really delighted to be talking to you today. Thank you for taking the time to come onto my podcast. For those of you who don't know you, David, tell everyone who you are, where are you in the world, and what kind of things are you up to at the moment?
My name is David. I live just northwest of Atlanta, Georgia, in the United States. Currently, I teach driver's education to new drivers. I teach defensive driving, and I teach people to ride motorcycles for Harley-Davidson motorcycles.
I don't know whether you heard that, but there was a motorcycle passing just as you said that. Crazy. I don't know how good Zoom is in the background, like taking out background noise, but as you were talking, there was a motorbike zooming around my house. So I hope that didn't pick it up. Lots of driving education, educating new drivers, educating drivers to drive motorcycles, which is clearly needed, obviously. And we need like good, passionate educators. And I'm sure you are. We're going to talk about what you're doing now, why you're doing it, and all of the good stuff that you're educating people on. However, as you know, this is Used to Be's Do Count. So we are going to focus a lot of the conversation stay on your used to be. So tell everyone what your used to be was.
So for 19 years, I was a police officer here in the metro Atlanta, Georgia area. During that career, I was primarily a police motorcycle officer, a traffic enforcement officer, and a fatality auto accident investigator.
And the last one was, say that again, a fatality...
auto accident investigator.
Auto accident investigator. Okay, so you were a police officer, a law enforcement officer in Atlanta, Georgia, mainly on a motorcycle, mainly traffic law. But the last bit, help me understand the last bit when you say...
So if somebody died in an auto accident, I was one of the investigators assigned to investigate how it happened.
Okay.
It's very similar to any crime investigation, like a murder investigation, except when somebody dies in an auto accident.
Sure. Okay, wow. Well, you must have seen some stuff, my friend. I want to understand when you became a police officer. So let's go way back to when you became a police officer. What age were you that you knew this is the career that you wanted to go into?
So it goes way back to, briefly, my grandfather was a firefighter, and he would take me to the fire stations when I was a little boy, and I was fascinated with public safety. And he actually wanted to be a police officer, but back then, in the 40s and 50s, there was height restrictions for a police officer, and he was too short. So he became a firefighter instead. That's where my fascination began. Then my fascination with police motorcycle officers actually started with the TV show Chips, if you've seen that or remember that from the 70s. But the fast forward, I had the opportunity in 1997 I met someone in the police department, and I had the ability to go along on ride-alongs with him. And after several ride-alongs, I became incredibly fascinated with obtaining the position. And in 1998, I applied, went through the interview process, became a police officer in 1998.
Nice. How old were you at that point, David?
Just shy of 28 years old, so 27 years old when I started.
Okay. And your fascination or your intrigue in being a police officer, but being a police officer on a bike, I guess that you were passionate about bikes as well. So you sort of,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you got to work. You got to work up to that. You don't just sign up and become a motor officer. You got to do your time in the trenches, and then
sure. Yeah. 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 I'm sure you do. So 1998, you were 27, 28 years old, a young
yeah.
man. You qualified to become a police officer. How long was the kind of process, I guess, the recruitment process?
At that time in the state of Georgia, the police academy was 10 weeks long, and then after that, we went through our own internal training, another 6 weeks internal training at the police department, and then an additional 3 months of being with another officer on the road before you went fully solo.
I see. I see. Yeah. So lots and lots of sort of stages, I guess. Yeah. 10
Correct.
weeks of police academy. When you said police academy, I just instantly thought of the movie as well.
Everybody does.
I just instantly thought of the movie, all the shenanigans that go on. Yeah. And probably lots of people dropping out. But I guess during that process, actually, did you ever have doubts about whether this was for you, or were you fully engulfed and were like, wow, this is fantastic, this is great, loving it? Or were there any sort of moments of doubt of what you'd chosen to do?
I never had any doubts about finishing and getting there. The police academy was not easy. I went to one that was a boot camp style police academy, so it was hard work, but I never had any doubts. I never at any point, and we had I think about 20% dropout, and we
I
had
imagine there's a
another.
quite a large number of dropouts for sure. I think people go into this kind of career for all different reasons, but sometimes maybe for the wrong reasons, and then don't realize how much hard work it takes to actually graduate, if you like.
Correct.
So yeah, I can imagine there are lots of dropouts, but you were sure that this was for you, and you never had any doubt. That's great. So then you become a police officer. You've shadowed whoever you've shadowed for 3 months, and you're we call it on the beat, I guess. Like you're out on the streets with people. You're on the beat. Is that how it works for you?
In America, there's several different terms. It's on the beat. Up north in the Northeast, they call it being on the job. Down here in the Southeast, we didn't have a particular catch of phrase, but everybody knows kind of what those mean. You know.
So yeah, that was your
Yeah.
transition. You were on the beat, and you were yeah.
Yes, correct, correct. I started out working the road, the overnight shift, handling calls from domestic violence to everything you can imagine,
Oh
shootings,
wow,
all of it. So,
overnight calls as well. Um, Before we get to the point where you were a traffic officer, which was obviously a lot of your career, when you were an overnight officer, can you remember any memorable sort of moments, cases, situations that you were in that was just like, this is unbelievable, where you sort of have this like pinch me moment, like, is this actually happening? Like, am I experiencing this? Because you must have seen some stuff.
oh yeah, I did. One of the ones I remember most was I was actually still with my training officer, and one thing that has always come natural to me is the ability to drive cars. I've just always been a natural at it, and we were there was an armed robbery at a fast food 24-hour fast food restaurant here in the area, and we were headed towards it. Somebody was behind the suspect, high speed chase kind of thing. So we were trying to catch up, and we were coming down the road. I was driving, and my training officer, we were coming up on a 90-degree right hand turn to get on the highway to take off, and I'm coming hot into this 90-degree turn, and he's screaming at me, "Slow down, slow down!" Well, I knew I had it. Because I've just always been able to drive cars. I won't tell you about the stuff I did in high school with cars that I shouldn't have, but so I hit this 90-degree curve, and I scream at him with an expletive in the sentence, "Shut up! I've got it." And as we hit the 90-degree turn, I hit it literally at the perfect speed where you could hear the tires kind of skipping across the pavement as I made the turn, and then hit the gas at what they call the apex of the turn. Off we went. We finally caught up to the group and caught up to the guy. And we got him stopped on the side of the road. Everybody, bails out of the cars to go after him, and he runs up into the woods. And another officer chases after him, and you see all of a sudden you see the officer's flashlight flip up into the air. You see the perpetrator's gun flip up into the air, and about 10 seconds later, he comes dragging this armed robbery suspect out of the woods by his shirt, throws him in the back of the car, and that was it. That was like, I've been on the road like a month.
This is the stuff of movies, and this the stuff of
Yeah.
TV shows. And I mean, I can just imagine as you were saying it, it's also a bit of a world away from what we experience in the UK. Because I mean, we definitely there'll be high speed car chases for sure, but
Mm.
you know the roads are different, your cities are built different, the roads are much bigger, so high speed car chases, and we don't have guns, you know, so we don't have these armed robberies in the same way that you do. So when we see that in the movies, it's like something incredible for us because we don't really see it a lot over here. And but what you were just saying as well was from a very young age you were really interested in driving, you were really a good driver, cars and motorcycles. And then doing this job absolutely allowed you to kind of
Yeah.
harness those skills and polish those skills.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I've
Yeah,
just I've just continued to nurture those skills all these years.
I love that.
Um,
I love that. Yeah. And so when did you become a traffic officer then? So when was the transition to traffic enforcement?
I transitioned into traffic enforcement in 2005, oddly enough, and we can go into this story if you'd like. But oddly enough, I was called by my supervisor while I was working disaster relief for Hurricane Katrina, and said, "Hey, you've been offered the job in traffic. Do you still want it?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm in Katrina right now, right? I'm a little busy." But yeah,
Oh, wow. Definitely. Talk about that. Yeah, this was huge. So talk for anyone that might not know, talk about what Hurricane Katrina was, where it affected, and what you were actually doing during that time.
so Hurricane Katrina was a it's still considered the most disastrous hurricane in U.S. history. But it came into the Gulf Coast, New Orleans, Mississippi, Alabama. In I think it hit like October or August 29th of 2005. I think that was the date. I'm not 100% sure on that. But it came in as a Category 5 straight into southern Louisiana and Mississippi. Um, and then what happened was there's something in a hurricane called storm surge, where basically water gets washed into the town. And if people don't know, New Orleans itself is a city that is literally built below sea level. So there's all kinds of what they call dikes and dams and to keep the water out. Well, when the storm surge, and not to mention it's on the ocean, it's also on a large lake called Lake Pontchartrain. And so that's a large inland lake. And so when the storm surge came in, it pushed all of the water in Lake Pontchartrain over into a town called Slidell, Louisiana. Well, when the backside of the hurricane came in, the winds are going the other way, and it proceeded to push all that water back into New Orleans, and then the levees broke. And so that's where the infamous flooding came, is literally the levees that were holding the ocean out of New Orleans were gone. We're gone, collapsed. And so it quite literally poured into the city of New Orleans. And so we sent a contingent down. We actually ended up working Slidell, the other side of the lake, the town in the other side of the lake. But my department sent a contingent down to Hurricane Katrina to help with disaster relief. And I'm pretty sure, can't quote this, but I think so. The hurricane came in Sunday night, late Sunday night. And then or it was early Sunday, early Sunday. Anyway, it came into town, it made landfall on Sunday. And I think, hit the road down there like 4 a.m. on Wednesday, and went down there, and we had a place to stay. Somebody we knew whose home had survived, so we hauled generators, we hauled supplies, and then we spent 7 days down there working disaster relief. And while I was driving down there, my supervisor called me and said, "Hey, you've gotten the spot in traffic. Do you still want it?" I went, "Yeah. When I get back, we'll talk about it."
Yeah, I mean, well, great. I mean, you've got something really exciting to come back for. So fantastic, but you're also just going into a disaster zone essentially. How long were you going to be staying there? Did you know at that point how long you were going to be stationed there?
So the group of us that went down, we went down as a we went down for 7 days, and at the time we were going. The group that went had decided we would use our vacation time to go. The city had not approved to pay us at the time, but we wanted to go. We wanted to help out. We wanted to do what we could. So we started out going down there on our vacation time. And then while we were down there, the city approved to pay us for all the time, all the overtime, and everything for being down there. And we worked for 7 straight 12-hour days. Half of us worked in the daytime, and half of us worked in the nighttime, 12-hour days. And so that was how long we stayed down there.
7 days, 12-hour days. I'm sure they were treacherous at times. I mean, you were saving people, moving people. Like, what was your day-to-day activities? Were you finding people?
We started out on still trying to do some level of search and rescue. That was like the first day, day and a half. And then they started winding down search and rescue, which then moved into helping out people that had nothing. I drove an SUV the whole week, and the entire back of my SUV were loaded down with what are called MREs, which over here are military prepackaged meals, and tons and tons of water. I just drove around with them. Anybody that needed anything, we just handed it to them. And we did that on and off throughout the entire time. And then the last few days, we switched the focus to getting people up and running again. Like, we would do things like help gut houses and help clear their furniture out and put it on the street because there was nothing savable, or help them do whatever they needed to do to start rebuilding their lives the last few days.
Oh, it's unimaginable, the devastation.
Yeah, it was an education for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Mother Nature, when she speaks, we have to listen, and that was devastating. And you were right there in the aftermath of it. Wow, wow. You then were on your way back, and you knew that you had something, I guess, really exciting to come back for, and you were transitioning to this law enforcement role, this traffic enforcement role. And this is really what you wanted to do, right? Because it meant that this was your transition of riding a motorcycle. Is that right?
Motorcycle and doing traffic enforcement and the accident investigation. Yeah, that was where I wanted my career focus to be.
And so this was 2005?
Correct.
Okay. And tell me about that. So how was it? Tell me kind of day to day what you were doing, what kind of experiences you were having, and were you happy?
So yeah, I was happy. So the bulk of your day was spent, doing traffic enforcement, making sure people were safe on the road, and of course pulling people over and writing tickets, which is what everybody, loves to hate the cops for. But so the bulk of the day was that, and then we would take turns being on call for a fatality accident. And I was the ones that come to mind. I was primary investigator. There was always a primary investigator assigned when a fatality occurred. There are two or three of them that come to mind that I won't ever forget, that I was primary on and or involved in, but primary on. I had one accident. A young gentleman had just got a brand new, well, not a brand new, but it was at the time a Nissan 300ZX, which was the high performance Nissan car back then. I don't know what the designation is now. And him and his buddies went out driving, and he looked at his 15-year-old buddy and says, "You want to drive it?" in the middle of the night. And his 15-year-old buddy said, "Yeah, sure, I want to drive it." And they were driving through a country club neighborhood where I worked. And his other buddies kept encouraging this 15-year-old to go faster and faster and faster. And so he was doing above 80 miles an hour through a residential neighborhood. And he lost control. And basically what he did was he scooped a U-Haul, 17-foot U-Haul moving truck with the front end of the car. And without getting too graphic, it obliterated him. It literally obliterated their driveway.
Wow. Wow. Oh my God, I've gone cold. This is the thing, right? You say that you're a traffic enforcement officer, and I think everyone's mind, including mine, goes to you're catching people for speeding and writing tickets, which is true, right? But what they don't understand is that you're on the road for all of your shift, experiencing and seeing all kinds of stuff, this being one of them. And that is, I mean, that's awful. I mean, you saw that, you witnessed that, and then you have to go and try to, I don't know, reconcile what's happened and investigate, you know, exactly what happened. That's well, that's traumatic. I mean, that is traumatic. I mean, the car accidents happen all the time. I've had some experiences, some personal experience, personal loved ones pass away in car accidents. It's no joke. Like, this is why when we get to what you're doing now, it's so important. Um, that is awful. I mean, how do you feel when you're going to an accident like that, seeing this kid obliterated?
This is going to sound cold, but you have no choice but to put it in the back of your brain, and you have to detach from it, because I mean that's by not by far the only one. I mean, I saw people killed in well, I saw them killed in murders and all kinds of stuff throughout my career, but I saw people killed in ways that people don't normally even imagine. And if you personalize every individual, you'll never survive. And so you take this very standoffish, cold, and sometimes you even joke about it amongst the people you work with. You make jokes, and people would think that that's horrible. But if you personalize it, you'll never survive. You'll go crazy.
Yeah, I totally. You have to emotionally distance yourself in order to, yeah, to crack on with your day and crack on with your week. Otherwise, you take stuff home and it can really traumatize you. So I totally get that. Yeah, it's survival at the end of the day, isn't it?
It is. It is very much so.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just wondering, by 2005, going into 2005, you were a police officer for 7 years. You your dues, and then you kind of found your career where you wanted to be
Correct.
in and amongst life. You know, how was being a police officer? Because I don't see being a police officer like just a job, right? It just is so much part of your identity. We as civilians see police officers where we just think they must drink and eat with police officer friends, and they must have that, you know, like it becomes part of your identity. So how was it part of your identity? How did you see yourself in the world? How did you see the world? And how did being a police officer kind of shape all of that?
Um, so especially the longer you're in it and the more you see, it does completely change you over time. Prior to being in police work in my 20s before 1998, I was primarily in the bar and restaurant business. So, I was having fun, having a good time. Um, I was very much a different person. Once I became a police officer and started going down that road, obviously, with just the one description of that auto accident, and like I said, I could go on for 100 other things. Those kind of things make you kind of cold and callous. The way I put it in terms that people can understand is my wife. Every once in a while, we'll be watching TV and she'll see some tragic story and she'll comment on, "Oh my God, how horrible, how devastating, how tragic," and she looks at me and I've just kind of got this. Yep, it happens. And not that I don't care, not that I don't see that as tragic, but I've learned to completely detach myself from that. So you go from a person who would go, "Oh my God, how horrible," to the person that goes, "Yep, is what it is." That's one of the big ways it changes you. You commented on, do you eat with other cops? Yeah, yeah. You don't do much, especially when you're working without other cops. Because if my back is to the door, I know the guy I'm sitting with, his back's not to the door, and he's got my back. Stuff like that. To this day, I go into a restaurant and I have to face the entry. If I don't face the entry, I can't sit down.
I get that. I totally get that. Yeah, I mean, it's a high risk job that you're doing, and you know, let's face it, police officers are some of the most disliked people in society from not everyone, but from some people, right? So you know that you're going to be a target for certain people, and so yeah, it's again something that I don't think about because I'm not a police officer, but once you go into that line of work, you need to know that people that are with you have got your back. And I guess the other people you can really rely on are the other people in that situation as well. Um, and that detachment, again, I completely understand why you would do that. I'm such a crier. I mean, I would cry over a commercial, an advert. I'm such a crier. It's ridiculous. I'm like ridiculously sensitive, and I could be watching something on TV and someone starts crying or talking about their story, and I like feel their pain. And I guess like if I could probably never be a police officer because of that, or never have seen some of the things that you've seen. But again, it's important because day to day, you're experiencing things in real life, in real time, that are devastating, that are tragic, that are life changing. But you have to investigate those things or deal with those things with a level, pragmatic head. And there has to be some emotional detachment to that. So I'm guessing then that spills over into when you're not at work. It's just who you become.
Absolutely. It spills over into who you become, how you operate. But the other thing I'll let you in on a little secret is we do our crying in private and quiet when nobody's looking. And that's just to point blank, put it in real terms. When nobody's around, nobody's looking, that's when we let it out. And so that's how you get rid of some of it. That's why you see police officers in therapy. That's why you see that kind of stuff, because we have to have an outlet where nobody else knows about it.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, I understand that. I do. I totally understand that. Can you remember, we've spoken about a couple of memorable moments that are quite tragic, but can you remember any really good, enjoyable moments or where you really helped someone and you know that you must have helped so many people, but you know that I guess you've really affected someone's life in a positive way and you really have that feel good feeling that it's not all tragedy and
So I have one story that I tell all the time that basically embodies this. And what I tell is, so you have to live on. You almost never know if you actually help somebody. You never hear about the outcome. You almost never hear about the end game. And I always tell people, they say, "Why did you become a cop?" I say, simply because my drug of choice is adrenaline. That's why I became a cop. But this story not only embodies the positive, but it embodies the real reason that I personally was a police officer. Um, you often get calls with parents calling that they've got a teenage son that just is out of control, all kinds of trouble, and they finally break down and call the police. I don't know what to do with this kid kind of call. Now, I'll be honest, there's two kinds of people that make that kind of call. People who, we can debate this for hours, who should have never been parents in the first place and want somebody else to fix the problem. And then there are the parents that are truly doing everything they can and are at their wits' end. And so one night I got one of those calls, and it happened to be a slow evening. And so I was able to go to the call and sit and talk with the mother. She was a single mother and her high school age son for quite some time. I spent a couple hours at the house. It was just one of those convenient nights where I could do that. And I talked to him about the possibilities, and I won't go extensively into what we talked about and how he could turn his life around or how I hoped he turned his life around. But whenever I had those conversations, I always had this ending to the conversation. I would give him my business card. We had a voicemail system where you could reach my direct voicemail at any time. And I said, "Look, here's my card." And I would say this right in front of the parent so that there would be not like I was going behind their back. I'd say, "Here's my card. If you've got anything you need to talk about, you're in trouble with drugs, you're in trouble with money, you're in trouble with a girl, you're in trouble with whatever, and you don't want to talk to mom and dad about it, call me, leave me a voicemail. I will find time to come meet with you." And I'd say, now, if I'm in Aruba scuba diving, I might not call you back for a week, but call me, leave me a voicemail. I will reach back out to you and we will get together. And I will help you. I said, and I will tell you straight up if it's something we need to go to your parents about that I have no choice but to go to your parents about. I said, but call me. And then I would always say, and if you manage to turn your life around, call me at some point and let me know. And so I had that conversation that night with this particular kid. I got up and went on about my evening. Several years passed, and the aforementioned wreck that we'll talk about in a little bit I happened to be working light duty, recovering from that situation, and I was working in dispatch. And the phone rings up in dispatch. I was taking non-emergency phone calls up in our dispatch center. The phone rings up in dispatch, and there's this voice on the other line that says, "Hey, can I speak to Officer Booth?" And I said, "Well, conveniently, you've got him." I said, and that would have never happened. Like the person that would have normally answered the phone would have transferred him to my voicemail, and that would have been it. But I happened to be the one that picked up the call, and he said, "I don't know if you remember me, but," and he started going down the road of his story. And as he told me who he was and when we had met, it clicked with me that this was that particular young man. And he said to me, "I just wanted you to know that after you sat and talked with me that night, I turned myself around." And he said, "I just graduated college with honors."
Yeah, you see, this is me. I'm a crier. You're making me go.
That's all right. I'm trying not to myself, but that is the reason that you do it. And in my entire career, if you can imagine, that's the only call I ever got like that. So you have to live on those.
Yeah, for sure. And that goes into something totally different to law enforcement. It goes into human connection, human improvement, really caring for people, for individuals, and to offer your advice, your service, your guidance in a way that is, yes, I'm a police officer. Yes, I'm here to keep you on the straight and narrow and operate within the law, but also you sort of offered a hand at mentorship, outside of parenthood, which is again is so so important to develop young people and having mentors that are not their parents. And you kind of offered that, and I think that's going above and beyond, and it shows me the kind of person and the kind of police officer you were, kind of person that you are, and the kind of police officer that you were. Yeah, and it's interesting that you said that you don't necessarily. Again, it's something that I don't think about, and it's something that is clearly apparent for you, is that you don't necessarily see the end of the good that you do. You see people for such a short period of time, a moment in their time, but you don't understand the ripple effect or the knock-on effect that that could have that leads to something good. You just come in, do what you need to do, say what you need to say, act the way that you need to act to fix that situation there and then, and off you go. And then you don't really necessarily get that good story ending. But this is yeah, this is I mean, you can dine out on that for a long time. That really did make me almost cry. It was amazing. Amazing. Let's talk about your accident then. So there was something that happened to you that essentially stopped you from being a police officer. This episode is called I Used to Be a Police Officer, so people know that you're no longer a police officer. So tell me what happened. There was a road traffic accident that you were involved with. Give me a little bit of the lead up to that and then what happened.
Correct. So basically, here in Georgia, many departments you can do what are called extra jobs or side jobs. You can work on the side to make extra money. And one of the things I did was I did funeral procession escorts for extra money. So I would escort funeral processions from the funeral home to the cemetery on my own police motorcycle. And I was coming home from doing one of those. I was on the interstate, and I passed by a lady who was driving. She was on the interstate. She was the speed limit of that particular interstate was 70 miles an hour. She was doing about 55 miles an hour. She was weaving all over the place. And when I rode by her, she was texting and driving. So I got away from her. I got by her. I said, "Oh my God, she's driving horrible. This is not going to go well." I was outside of my jurisdiction. So there's rules here in America that say I couldn't have really stopped her to deal with that situation because I was on my off-duty time. I was out of my jurisdiction, et cetera, et cetera.
Which is absolutely crazy, by the way. I mean, like, look, let's not get political. It's not like I'm trying to change the world or change America. But for me, I just can't understand that concept that you are a very experienced officer. You're also a very experienced road traffic officer. You have all of the skills, all of the knowledge, all of the experience to deal with that situation. But because of the way the states work, you're out of jurisdiction and you're off duty. So you can't actually pull her over and stop her. You're not within your rights to do that. That's crazy to me. because the situation could have been very different.
Yeah, it is. There's the multi-jurisdictional thing that a lot of countries don't have here. Additionally, at that time, believe it or not, there was not a texting and driving law yet. It was not yet against the law. So she actually wasn't violating the law as horribly as so I got about 7 miles up the interstate, and traffic got backed up about 7 miles further up the interstate, and she caught up to me. So I was in backed up traffic doing about 30 miles an hour, and that same woman who was still texting and driving straight rear ended me while she was still texting and driving. And at impact speed, she hit me doing 75 miles an hour on the motorcycle. I was thrown back onto the hood of her car, and she proceeded to carry me on the hood of her car for another 500 feet before she hit another vehicle, which catapulted me into the air. And then I landed in the concrete. That was the events of the wreck. And then after that, I was life flighted to the local trauma center, where I was hospitalized with a severe shattered pelvis, multiple fractured vertebrae, and a torn bladder. That was on a Friday afternoon in February of 2014. At the end of February 28th to be specific. From that incident, I was put into a medically induced coma on that Monday, and I gained. That's a weird way to put it, but I contracted several infections, including a lung infection, including what's called septic infection, because of all that was going on with me. My body shut down and quit producing blood, so they had to transfuse me 5 times my body blood, and my vital signs started going down and down and down, and I was in a coma for 3 weeks and on full life support. I wasn't able to breathe on my own. They ended up having to give me a tracheostomy so that I could breathe, and that's where I went downhill. And they did not expect me to live through that.
This is almost life ending, certainly life changing. Your pelvis was shattered. You had vertebrae issues. You said you had what were the other
Torn bladder.
torn bladder? Oh my
Yeah,
goodness! And then of course, then you went into a coma for 3 weeks and had all of these other issues along with it. Wow.
correct.
Well, you're married, right? You were married at the time. So,
Correct.
yeah, to your
No, I
wife.
was not married at the time,
You
actually.
weren't married at the time. Okay,
Um,
so who did you have around you at the time when this was going?
at the time, my father and his wife lived in Augusta, Georgia, which is a city about 3.5, 4 hours away. So they came in and stayed at my house. Then my sister came down from Michigan to handle my affairs. And then at the time, my girlfriend was around me. A fun story. I don't know if I should say fun, but so at one point while I was in a coma, my vital signs were so low and I was in such jeopardy that the hospital staff told my family to say their goodbyes. They said I wasn't going to survive the night. Women always love this part. My whole family said goodbye, and the last person to say goodbye was my girlfriend. The hospital staff said about an hour after my girlfriend said goodbye and left, my vital signs started going back up. That's the woman that is now my wife.
Oh,
Um,
I was waiting. I was really waiting for whether this was just a girlfriend of the time and now this is someone else. But no, that lady is now your wife.
yeah, that
Yeah.
lady is now my wife.
And this is the power of love.
Yeah, truly, as my girlfriend,
Wow.
she worked her job all day, came to the hospital almost every night while I was in a coma, and sat by my bed. She took
Oh,
care of me while I was in the nursing homes afterwards for recovery. And while this is always a cute story people love too, but if you've ever watched the TV show Big Bang Theory,
oh
um,
yes, I do. Yeah,
she
yeah,
would she would sit by my bed each night while I was in a coma and sing Soft Kid.
yeah. She sounds like an
So
extraordinary woman,
she
and
is.
yeah, I'm so happy that you had someone there.
Yeah. So my sister took care of all my affairs and made 3 or 4 trips back and forth throughout the duration, taking care of me and taking care of my home and taking care of my financial affairs.
Yeah. Wow. Your family and your girlfriend at the time, your now wife, they must have been just beside themselves. I mean, the doctors are essentially telling them to say their goodbyes. They have to mentally and emotionally prepare themselves for that. And your sister's dealing with all of the practicalities of life admin as well that she's trying to fix for you. But then you did make a recovery. So how long after that did you then go into nursing homes and were on recovery? How long did that happen?
So I was in the coma for 3 weeks. Including the coma, I was in intensive care for 5 weeks. I spent 10 days in an acute rehab center and then approximately 2 months in nursing homes, recovering, learning to walk again, on and on and on. One of the resultant injuries from everything that went on with me was my right hand and arm became about 70% paralyzed. So to this day, my right hand is largely not useful, which is what event.
Still,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
it's still paralyzed now?
Correct. Correct.
Okay. Oh, wow.
Um,
Wow.
it's one of those things. The nerve damage. What happened was it crushed my what they call the brachial plexus nerve bundle, which is essentially the spinal cord for your arm. And so it left me below the elbow quite non-functional. I have minor functionality, um, and that's essentially after trying to fight back for almost 2 years. That's part of what ended my career for good.
I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. It's crazy because you're obviously doing a job where, of course, there is risk of you having an accident. I'm just wondering, did you ever? You know the risk is there. You're driving all day, but you said yourself you're passionate about driving. You were a good driver. You always have been. You weren't just driving cars. You were driving a motorcycle for work, and I mean, with a motorcycle, you're so exposed. If anything like that happens, it is a different kind of accident. But even though the risk is there, did you ever foresee anything like this happening in your career?
I'll tell you this: police officers are no just like everybody else. They believe it's never going to happen to them until it does.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and during the time of recovery as well, when it's obviously a long road to recovery, which is still happening now, like you're still recovering now and going, we'll talk about it because you've had a surgery recently. But during that initial time of recovery, I'm just wondering because you said, we spoke about how much being a police officer was your identity. One informs the other, and it's just becomes who you are. So during that recovery, what were your thoughts about being a police officer and going back to the force? Was that a motivation for you to get better, to get back to the force, or were you doubting your career then?
Um, in retrospect, in the back of my mind, I knew I wasn't going to be able to make it. But I fought and did everything I could to. I didn't want to give up. I didn't want to let go of that career. I did everything I could to make it back, and I actually did make it back temporarily. It took me, like I said, almost 2 years, 18 months of fighting and rehabbing and learning how to do things without the full use of my hand. And I managed to qualify on the qualifications required to be a police officer, from shooting to everything else, without the full use of that hand, and tried to make a comeback. And I did temporarily. And then I don't want to say this bitterly, but the department I worked for at the time, never probably in hindsight, probably never thought I would make it back, because they threw every obstacle at me that they could. And then after I did make it back to the road, they came up with some excuses to terminate my employment.
That's terrible. I mean, it's terrible that you can see and feel that actually you wasn't looked after. Really what should have happened is that you fought tooth and nail to get back there. Whether it was the right thing for you or not really should have been your decision, not theirs. They should have supported you. You've given your life, you've dedicated your life to service. This accident has happened, no fault of your own. And 18 to 24 months of grueling recovery to get back there, that's awful. I'm really sorry that happened. They should have supported you. They should have put you in a role or put you somewhere where you felt comfortable and been patient and been kind. That's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah, well, like I said, that's
But
what they decided to do. I try not to be bitter about it, but
yeah, Yeah. Well, I wonder, when you are, 18 months or so in this rehab recovery situation, in and out of care homes, working with people helping you to rehab, there must have been some highs and lows there. There must have been some really tough days. There must have been some great days where you've been making breakthroughs and stuff. What's keeping you going there? What's keeping your head in check and keeping you motivated?
So the lows of it, I'll tell you about the lows first. Is I went through bargaining with God. I'll do anything. Give me my hand back. Let me come back. I'll do anything to have my hand back. Um, to the lower point where you come to the realization that you're just never getting it back. You find a good doctor. He does everything he can. I went through several surgeries to give me additional function to my right hand that I would not have had without those surgeries. But he was very honest and forthright with me that we'll give you what you can, but it's never gonna. He says you're gonna have about 30% functionality at best. And so eventually you come to the realization that you're never getting it back, even though you prayed for months that you'd wake up with a miracle in the morning that it would come back. So I went through all of that. Then post termination was, how do I deal with life without being a police officer? And at that point in my life, I truly found out you don't find out how much of your identity something is until it's not your identity anymore. And that's when I learned after my termination just how much of my identity was wrapped up in what I did and who I was, and quite frankly, who I still am. I mean, I still hang out with police motorcycle officers, and I ride motorcycles with cops, and I go to police, memorials and functions and charities. It's still all part of my identity. And so that was the lowest part, was wrestling with, where do I go from here? I always put it in this phrase: when when my career was taken away from me, um, they stole my purpose in life, because that was my purpose in life. Um, Everything I did.
That is so difficult. When a job like that, which is so crucial to uh, your day to day purpose, and like you said, your identity, it just becomes who you are. When that's gone, finding that purpose again, oh my goodness, it's so difficult. I was going to ask you obviously about, how was your identity after not being a police officer, but it's nice to hear that actually you still are. In some ways, you're not a law enforcement officer in the same way, but it is still so much part of your identity, friends for life that you've made, and still engaging in those social situations still with police officers. It's really nice to hear that has continued. But I guess what's next for you work wise, right? What do you do with your days? How do you feel your days? How do you use all of your experience? So how did that happen? How did the development into what you're doing now happen?
So obviously, we've already talked about the fact that I teach for Harley. So along with that 18-month recovery, I also struggled to get back on the bike. And I practiced and I practiced and I practiced until I was able to fully ride again. And then along I think about 2018, um, I went to the people who taught the motorcycle class that I first took to learn how to ride and get my motorcycle license. And I said, hey, how do you do what you do? And they went, we got just the guy for you. So I went and saw this individual who ran the program at one of the local Harley-Davidson dealerships. And I said, hi, this is who I am. And conveniently, he remembered my wreck being all over the news. And so he got me into the certification classes with the state that got me to be a rider coach for an organization called the Motorcycle Safety Foundation here in the United States. And then the Harley that I worked for is a sponsor of that program. They put that course. And so that's how I got to do what I do with motorcycles. And then in addition to that, about 4 years ago, I became a driving instructor. And so I'm able to teach my passion for motorcycle riding and those classes are almost exclusively adults. Number one, you have to be at least 17 to take it. So that's exclusively adults.
And
And
also riding a motorcycle at I mean, I'm sure people do ride Harleys at 17, 18, but generally Harley-Davidsons are more of a mature person's bike, right? I guess,
Correct.
yeah,
Correct.
it appeals to them. So that's a certain demographic for sure.
Correct. And I don't actually tell my story in that class because I contend if I told that story to beginner riders, they'd leave the class. Uh,
Yeah.
but but I then became a driver's ed instructor. And when which is here in Georgia, it's a certain number of hours that 15-year-olds have to spend behind the wheel to get their driver's license, and then a certain number of hours that they have to spend in classroom. So when I started teaching the classroom portion, um, I went to the people the school that I teach at, and I told them my story, and I said, "Would you mind if I told my story to these kids?" Because now texting and driving is against the law, but if you drive around today, people don't take that law seriously. They don't take that.
No, they still don't, and I see it all the. It angers me so much when I see it. I saw it just yesterday. People are still doing it, and you just think, why? And okay, we know kids, their heads are in their phones and stuff, but I see fully grown adults, 30, 40, 50-year olds doing it, and you think, I, I'm sorry, but you should know better, right? I mean, nobody should do it, but at that age, you should know better, and people still don't take this seriously.
No, they don't. And so when I asked them, "Do you mind if I tell this story to the students?" Their reaction was, quite frankly, "Do we mind? You must tell your story to these students. Please tell your story to these students. If you don't, if they ask me if I minded telling it, because it is quite personal." And so when I started telling it to the students a couple of years ago, and I actually ended up putting a slideshow together with pictures of the wreck scene and even a couple of pictures of me in the hospital. And when these kids see, I just look across the room at 40 students, and when you see the looks on their faces, when they realize, and I hope it has an impact, I hope it stops them, but at least the looks on their faces in the classroom are beyond belief that this is what simply using my cell phone in my hand can do while I'm driving, aside from the fact that the government says, no, you shouldn't, which they don't care about. And I've even had some parents in the classroom that have gone, wow. So I realized that my story has a huge impact.
Your story does have a huge impact, which is why you're on the podcast telling it as well. It's an incredible story, an incredible life that you've had. I really hope, and I think it will, but I really hope that it does have the impact that it needs to those new drivers. We hear that this rule of no texting while driving or no looking at your phone while driving, etc., is there, and everyone knows in the back of their head. Anyone that's got common sense knows why it's there, but you never think anything's going to happen to you. And unless anyone's experienced anything happening like that to anyone close, it's always just at a distance, which is why people do it. So I think actually explaining, telling your story, showing the images and explaining that to them brings it a little bit closer, makes it a little bit more real. And I just hope and pray that they don't, that they think about that. When someone's texting, they're looking at their phone, they think about that. Do you enjoy what you do now? Do you get that? Have you found that joy, that purpose in what you're doing now?
Yes, I truly have started, like I said, getting that purpose back, which is why when I realized the impact that my story started to have, because I'll be honest with you, I never thought people would say, "Oh, your story is amazing. You should tell your story. You should write a book." I was like, "Yeah, whatever." And when I started telling it, I went, "Okay, maybe these people are right. Maybe my story does have a purpose, can have an impact, can save or change somebody's life." And so that's why, up to recently, I have endeavored to start getting my story out there so that I can tell it, so that people do realize, and not just in texting and driving, all the things we do behind the wheel nowadays. I mean, today's modern cars, I mean, you can watch a movie going down the road in today's modern cars. Are you kidding me?
Crazy. And like we're almost there with like self-driving cars as well. And even the
Mm-hmm.
cars that we're driving is like partly just self-driven anyway. So people are definitely getting distracted a lot more easily because of the technological world. And then with cars almost driving themselves, and we're going to be there soon. Who knows? I don't know. It's like it's kind of crazy. what's kind of crazy to me as well, which is why I feel like maybe you should write a book because it would be incredible. You must have seen it all. You know, as a police officer, you've seen so much. And part of what you've seen and experienced and had to deal with in your day-to-day job was about being on the road because from 2015, from 2005 to when was the accident? 2015?
2014, early
2014.
2014.
So
Yep.
9 years, almost 10 years of being a law enforcement officer on the road, right? Road traffic, seeing accidents, seeing people speed, seeing people carrying out these crazy behaviors behind the wheel and trying to deal with that for almost a decade. And then having the experience from the other side of you being a victim of that is just, it's bonkers. It's crazy to me. What's also crazy to me is that you couldn't stop her. I already said it. We don't need to go over that, but you couldn't stop her when you wanted to because of the jurisdiction. I just wonder what happened to her. Was she hurt in that accident or was she arrested? What happened?
She was injured. I don't know the extent of her injuries, but she was transported to the same hospital I was. I think she spent 36 hours in that hospital being treated for her injuries, which I think most of her injuries came from hitting the other car, but I can't say for sure. What happened to her? She got a ticket for what's called following too close, which is the ticket you get here in the United States when you rear end somebody. Um, Now, it's the unique situation of the law is if the loss of my limb had been as a result directly of the accident, she could have been charged with something else, but it was not. If I had died, she would have been charged with vehicular homicide. But because I survived and came out the other end, I made the argument with the prosecutor because they waited to file all the charges until I got out of the hospital. Because obviously, if I had died, there would have been different charges. So I spoke with the prosecutor. He gave me because of what I did for a living, the prosecutor gave me the courtesy of speaking with him before he moved forward with the case. I made the argument that because she was texting and driving and weaving on the road so badly to the point where people were calling her in before she hit me, people were calling and saying, hey, somebody's got to stop this woman. She's going to kill somebody. That he could have made a reckless driving case, which would have carried much more substantial penalties. One of the anomalies of law enforcement in the United States is the cops can make all the cases they want. At the end of the day, it's the prosecutor that decides what to move forward with. He decided to move forward with what's called following too close, which is a traffic violation. Now, because I'm also an accident investigator, I can also, which drives my wife crazy, argue that side of the argument. That at the end of the day, if you remove the result, all she did was rear end me. Because again, texting and driving was not illegal at the time. So the only law she violated was rear ending me. I can make both sides of the argument. It drives my wife crazy. If you remove
Well,
the
it's kind
result,
of crazy to me because the end result is not a factor of the weight of the prosecution, really, because it was still life changing and it was still hugely detrimental and impactful. So it's crazy that it's like what it needed to be death in order for something serious to happen. Like that's crazy to me. I mean, it was serious. It was almost death. You've survived it. You've recovered. Not fully though. You know, life changing, life altering situation, but still not enough to prosecute. It's crazy. I'm just wondering because I'm hearing a couple of things that almost make me feel, and maybe some of the listeners feel that this is where the trust in the law falters a little bit. And sometimes people have this view of the law and the law enforcement, and their trust wavers because they have experiences and situations. This is one of those situations where someone who wasn't a police officer would have gone, you see, this is the way the law's set up. I don't have trust and faith in the law anymore. And this is why I dislike police officers. Can you see that? That you've had that experience. That's what experiences people have. Did it make your trust and faith in the law falter? Or were you just...
oddly enough, no. I hate to say that because I knew the system. But if I were to step outside the system, trust me, it drove my wife crazy. She wanted me to go to court on this lady's day in court and confront her and show her what she did. And I wouldn't do it. I did not want to go to court the day she went to court on her citation. I take solace in the fact that, her auto insurance was $1 billion a year for the next several years,
Yeah.
because nobody would insure her after what she did. But
Actually,
but
that's a good point because it's something that I wouldn't have thought about as well. But it's a good point that there is some justice served there as well because that is, that is a continuous expense and inconvenience to her, and it's not maybe what your wife would have wanted or what you would have wanted, but it's a small bit of justice. And also thinking about it as well, it even goes back to what you were saying before. Your wife wanted you to do that, and I'm kind of like, from an emotional point of view, I can totally understand that. But this is again where you can distance yourself, where you can detach yourself almost, where the system, where you can stay pragmatic.
well, so here's the way I put it to people, if you don't mind me throwing this in here, is my wife couldn't figure out why. For a long time, she couldn't figure out why I didn't want to go there and confront her. And now I have the whole report. I have all the documentation in a box in my attic. I haven't pulled it out since that year. But when I tell this story, they ask me, who was she? And why didn't you confront her? And I tell them all the time, I said, I don't know who she was. I have the paperwork. It's in there. I don't know her name. I don't know much about her at all. And they ask me why. And I tell them this. I say, I was given a second lease on life I was not supposed to live. But that day, in that instance, over those texts, that woman took from me everything that I loved about life at the time. If I know who she is, if I don't know who she is, I can't hate her for it. And quite frankly, especially with the extra lease that I've been given, I don't have time to hate somebody.
No, no. And it's just testament to your recovery, really. Recovery is, of course, all of this physical rehab and physical recovery that you're working with doctors and nurses and physiotherapists and stuff. But there's the mental recovery as well. And I think that's 50-50, really. It's 50% of it. It's all fed into one another. And you can't stay in victim mode. You can't stay bitter. You can't stay hateful. Otherwise, it's going to affect your recovery. And it's so much more difficult to let that go. It's so much easier to sort of blame, the blame is on her, and I hate her and I hate the world, and why has this happened, and stay in that victim state. But you haven't. It seems to me that you haven't.
I try not to. Like I make the joke all the time. I have every excuse to crawl into a bottle, but I'm not going to.
Good for you. Good for you. Yeah, absolutely. So you found your purpose in the world again, which is great. And you spoke already about your identity and how I guess it was in a bit of crisis at the time, being wrapped up in being a police enforcement officer for so long. But you've kind of reconciled that identity now with what you're doing now. And still, as the police journey started, it started because of watching Chip on the motorcycles and loving driving and being a bit of an adrenaline junkie and wanting to do that. And you're almost sort of like continued that whole career post being a police officer. I love that. That's
took me a long time to figure out where to go, but I think maybe I have.
Yeah. What's next for you, David? Anything in the pipeline? Are you just happy you're doing what you're doing what you love, and you're happy doing that? Or is there anything coming up? A book, maybe?
Right. I have been writing. I met a writer. I met a writer who'd written over 100 books. She's a contract writer. She's written some of her own novels. She's written, then she's written on contract, like she's written Nancy Drew books and stuff like that, which you don't put your own name on when you write. So I asked her, we had some time to spend some time together. I met her at a hotel at an event that I was at in spring. And I said, I don't get how to go. And she said, just sit down and write. When you feel the movement, sit down and write every day, or if you can, every day. And so since I met her, I've just, various parts of this whole story, when something comes to mind, I'll write a couple pages about this little segment of it or that little segment of it. So right now I have dozens of pages written that make no sense if you try and put them together, but eventually my writings will come together to something. So that's where I'm at right now. And I want to, like I said, I want to start this speaking journey. and this telling my story journey. So it's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm kicking around the idea of starting a YouTube channel, but I'm researching how to do that right now.
Okay, good. Well, we'll look out for it. I'll look out for it. Make sure if you do start your YouTube channel that I'm one of the first to know, because I'll make sure that it's linked to this episode. Once your episode is released, it doesn't exist, it won't be there. But later on, if it does exist, it can be added to the show notes so that when people hear your episode later on, they can link to whatever you want it to. So let me know for sure. I think your story is one of recovery that is not hateful and bitter and staying in the victim mode, which some people do. And I think that's really inspiring. And I think understanding all of the experience that you've had as a police officer and leading into your accident is it's an incredible story, really. And people like me who are not police officers, who do something completely different for a job, don't really understand what you go through day to day. So having that insight, even those couple of stories that you've told, having that insight is such a huge eye-opener. And then we hear about you experiencing and being the victim of this road traffic accident yourself, which is just like mind-boggling, right? Like, how did this happen? Like, it's crazy. When you were off duty as well. Madness. Who would have thought? Life throws us curveballs.
My mom always makes the comment, God gives us challenges to bring us closer to God. And my response usually is, well, I'm close enough. I don't need any more.
Yeah. Could you let him know, please? Let him know.
Yeah.
We're close enough. It's very inspiring, David. I really appreciate you being here and taking the time to speak to me today. It is an incredible story, and I hope the listeners are they're going to be amazed by your story, but I hope that they all think twice next time their phone pings and they're driving, not to look at it. Doesn't matter. You can wait. Stop texting and driving. Yeah.
And I want to thank you for having me. So.
Oh, you're more than welcome.
Like I said, I hope to be able to tell my story more and get it out there and maybe save another life.
Thank you so much, David.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, David. Thank you so much for your time and for your conversation and for your insight into, how one really rebuilds their life after such a tragic accident and such a sudden end to a career which actually you loved and you probably wouldn't have ended at that point. It's kind of devastating, really. Something that really made me think is that kind of conversation with God that you were talking about. When you have those situations where you end up pleading with God, you end up praying a lot, and whether you are religious or not, I think we can all relate to being in a place in our lives when we do that pleading. But the realization actually that David wasn't necessarily going to get full use of his hand back and that this was going to be something that affected him for the rest of his life. That realization, that acceptance, and then that growth through that was really something that I took out of this episode. And actually, if there's one key takeaway that we can all take from this episode, that is, do not text and drive. I don't want to be preachy here, but come on, texting on your phone while you're driving is just ridiculously stupid, and you're not only just putting yourself at risk, but you're putting everyone else at risk that might be on that road at that time. And if David's story is anything to go by, it is proof that texting and driving can cause serious damage to people's lives. Hey, lovely listener, did you enjoy the episode? Are you enjoying the podcast? Are you enjoying the whole season? I don't know, because you're not talking to me. So please, my request to you is to reach out on the socials or leave a comment on the episode itself and just let me know whether you're enjoying it, what you liked, what you disliked. Are there any future episodes that you'd like to hear me do? Absolutely, I want to hear from you. Please engage with me in my community, and also make sure that you have rated the podcast wherever you're listening. That really does help me a lot. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, stay safe, stay fabulous as ever, and I will see you very soon on another episode.